It went all the way to the final lap.
Lando Norris has chased him all the way to the flag, but Max Verstappen will take back the top step. Max Verstappen wins in Imola. What a finish from those two across the line. It's new opposition for Verstappen, but the same result. The Dutch driver does it again, and he beats Lando Norris by 7/10 of a second.
We did a great race, considering how we got started, you know. But I have to work hard for that. 1 or 2 more laps there, that's all I needed. Well done, guys. Oh, it's frustrating not to win. Feels a bit more painful now.
Max was mighty, but something's changed in Formula One. Verstappen has a true rival, and his name is Lando Norris. Welcome to Imola. The paddock is buzzing after a thrilling Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. I'm Tom Clarkson, and with me, Diego Mejia from Fox Sports Mexico. Diego, let's just start with getting your reaction to what was a stunning end to that Grand Prix.
Yeah, Tom, I think it was a classic. As soon as the battle was starting to unfold, I was reminded of the 2005, 2006 Alonso versus Schumacher. Very different case here, but still, you know, it's similar, it's a classic, it's going to be hard to overtake, but there's that sense that something might just happen, you know, and Max on the radio was quite irritated. He was suffering in that final part of the race, and Lando was coming for him. I mean, any mistake would have been, you know, crucial to him being able to get a chance to overtake or not. He could have lost the race at many different points, I guess, Lando. From what he says, it was mostly about his first stint. I guess also the fact that he came out of the pits behind Checo and had to work his way through him. I mean, when you finish the race only 7/10 away from victory or from the winner, basically, you see where you could have maybe gained those tenths. And I guess the good news is that we had a big battle, that McLaren somehow has shown that Miami was not just a fluke, you know, and that it was just a safety car. It was much more to it. They confirmed that with both drivers, making us think that many good things might come in the future races, I guess.
I completely agree. Just on the Piastri thing, his side of the garage very much feels that had he not had that 3-place grid penalty, he would have won that Grand Prix, because he made an amazing start from P5. Lando Norris, of course, thinks that with one more lap, he would have won that Grand Prix. Shoulda, woulda, coulda, obviously, but I felt Max actually had him under control. Do you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, with so many wins now under his belt, 59, all those wins count when you have to fight for it. And this was one of the days where Max really had to fight for that victory. Even from Saturday, you know, because you see, you know, the tow that he got from Hülkenberg in the end proved crucial, because you start the race on pole, you can control, and then it's very different when you have to overtake. And the fact that he put himself in that position to benefit from Hülkenberg's tow, to get that pole and then defend it on the first corner, and then defend it when Lando was coming. It's all these little things that made the difference, you know? And Max is proving that he just doesn't win because he has the best car. He was up for a challenge this week, and he extracted every little bit that the team and the car had.
Formula One, as you say, is now down to tiny margins, isn't it? The top 3 in qualifying separated by 1/10 of a second around a 5.2 kilometre lap. Just extraordinary. But let's talk more about the battle for the win. Here's what Max Verstappen and Lando Norris had to say in the press conference.
As soon as I swapped to the hard tires, it was, I mean, maybe not the first 5 to 10 laps, but after that I was like, I'm not sure I can bring this to the end, you know, because the tires just fell out of the operating window, and it was just like driving on ice, really snappy, and just you can feel when the tires are not gripping up anymore. Like turn 7, I almost ended up in the grandstand at some point. So yeah, it's just very difficult, really weird lines that I had to take, but those last 10 laps, you know, I was really trying to survive with the tires, and then suddenly Lando really picked up pace. So yeah, I could see him, of course, catch up. I was not sure if I could keep him behind, but I was just trying to do the best I could, pushing as hard as I could with the grip that I had. And yeah, luckily it was just enough laps.
How concerned were you about Lando?
Well, I mean, as soon as it was like half a second a lap, I was like, that's a lot. But at the other end, you can't do anything about it. So I was just trying to do my pace. You cannot suddenly try and force a half a second out of it when you don't have the balance. So I was just trying to, really not make mistakes, really try to drive around the balance issues that I had and be quick on the straight. So that's basically what I think helped me a bit at the end also. But with the rear wing that we had, we're quite fast on the straight. And that probably helped a bit in the last few laps to defend.
All right, look, very well done today. Thank you, Max. Lando, let's come to you next. Just 0.7 of a second behind Max at the line. What were you thinking in those closing laps?
I was just praying for one more lap. I was just praying for someone to say one more lap. I did everything I could, and I was pushing like hell to get there and catch up and have a chance. But as soon as you get within 2 seconds, you start to lose downforce and grip. The tyres start to overheat again. So I kind of struggled for a couple laps, but once I understood how I had to drive again, like the last lap I managed to get there, and 0.7, like one more lap, at least he would have had to defend into turn 1, and maybe something could have come from that. But one lap too late. It's a shame, but it is what it is, and we just struggled too much in the beginning of the race.
Well, I was going to say, if you could run this race again, is there anything that you do differently that would give you a chance of beating Max?
Like Max said, like once the tyres are where they are, you can't actually do a lot. So I mean, we're expecting it to be a little bit colder today than what it was. So we kind of set up the car more for colder conditions rather than hot. And I think I paid the price in general. That's why I had to do so much of an introduction to the tyres and kind of bring them up so gently and look after them. Because if I didn't, I just would have fallen off a cliff like the others did. So my only chance was to drive my race. And that meant being under pressure from Charles for more laps than I would have liked. But as soon as I kind of cleared the traffic and got back into my own rhythm, then I felt good with the car. The tyres kind of came back to me and I could push and I was happy. So from then on, the pace was amazing, and it's a good sign. It's always a good thing to have is good race pace. But clearly, when it's hotter and there's more degradation to the rear tires, we start to struggle a lot more. And this is something we know, and maybe we could have prepared for a little bit more. But nevertheless, I'm happy with the outcome.
Now, Max's winning margin this season has, on average, been 14.3 seconds. Today, as you said earlier, was down to 0.7 of a second. Do you think Red Bull are worried?
They may be, but I guess their weekend wasn't a smooth one. As I probably told you, I spend a lot of time in front of the Red Bull garage because I do a lot of, covering for what's going on with Checo all the time. And you usually don't see a lot of, changes on this kind of coming in to adjust the front flap and making, consistent changes all the time on the setup. This was another weekend, just like Australia, when you kind of got the feeling that they were not getting it spot on as quick as usual. And you could see on Checo's side, when the car is not at its best, Checo suffers the most, and this was obviously the first tough weekend of the year for Checo. And it all started with his crash, but that just showed that at Red Bull things were not coming as easy as other weekends. So there may be some, getting most out of what they brought to this race. They listed a number of parts. It was hard to spot the differences, not as difficult as, say, in Ferrari or what McLaren brought to Miami. But they had brought some performance to the car. And then you see, and it was just as close as Miami, where when you look at the performance of McLaren relative to Red Bull, they were right there, but this time there were no safety cars. It was just an outright battle between them both.
I think there are a lot more upgrades to come on that Red Bull. I go back to a conversation I had with Adrian Newey back in Bahrain. I actually mentioned this on last week's podcast, that he said the car was going to look very different here at race 7. It doesn't, which makes me think there's more to come, which is a bit ominous, I think, for the rest of the pack. But I thought we also saw this weekend just how solid the backup crew at Red Bull is. Sebastian Buemi, their test and reserve driver, did an 11-hour stint on the simulator on Friday night. I mean, that's awesome. And they clearly made progress with the car as well.
Yeah, obviously, because after Friday, Max admitted that they were not happy at all with how the car was behaving. I was saying Checo was on the same boat. They tried different let's say, ways of trying to extract the performance of the car on Friday. They thought that if they put that together, they would be where they usually are. But in the end, they were not in a dominant position anywhere during the weekend, and it was just came to fine margins, as you said. I guess that there's probably more to extract from what they brought here. But now we're in Europe. Now we're going to see more changes from race to race. It's very interesting what will come in Barcelona, which is usually a very telling track in terms of what everybody has, at least for this first part of the year. But yeah, obviously Red Bull needs to come up with some more performance because they've got McLaren right on their heels.
Do you think the jump that we've seen from McLaren, both in Miami and here, is here to stay? Do you think it'll work across all tracks? Do you think when we go to Monaco next weekend, Norris and Piastri will be up there?
I think it's very specific Monaco as usual. I would expect them to be there. Max was telling me in the TV pen that the kind of corners that you need to perform at Monaco are not good, that bumpy tracks are not best suited to RB20 either. So he expects some challenges there, but it's a track where maybe the driver can make more of a difference than anywhere else. So I would expect him to put that extra bit that probably the car doesn't have at Monaco. But we will see. It's always swinging, a little bit. Every track tends to favor some characteristic that it's prevalent in one or another car. We may see those swings, but what I feel from McLaren is that this has been coming for some time already. It's been coming from last year. It's a building towards what we're seeing right now, and the fact that every time they bring parts to the track, you see that they do what they expect, or at least that's what it seems from the outside. So it's not like what we see, for example, with Mercedes. It's a bit of a erratic pattern that sometimes things work, sometimes the car performs, sometimes it doesn't. And with McLaren, you get the feeling that this is, building momentum more and more every time. Obviously, fighting with Red Bull is going to be tough anyway, but they've shown now for 2 consecutive races that they can give them the fight.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned the bumps, because just before we heard from Max Verstappen in the press conference there, he came into the room and he was holding his left shoulder and he was saying that it was the bumps. He was really feeling the bumps. I've never heard him complain of bumps in any Red Bull of this regulation. So it was interesting that he was feeling it here. It is a bumpy track. We hear the drivers talking about that, but it makes me wonder what sort of setup they had on the car here for him to be feeling quite so beaten up. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because Max Verstappen was doing 2 races this weekend. The real one, in the real world, that we had here at Imola, but he was also competing for his sim racing team, Team Redline, in the Nürburgring 24-hour sim race, which he won. But he did do a 4-hour stint last night. He then did another 2 hours from 8:30 to 10:30 on race morning. Did that in any way have a negative effect on what he was trying to do here in Formula One?
I'm not sure it does. I think Max is the kind of individual that has this ability to shift focus very quickly from one thing to the other and not, mix things up. I remember very well a guy who used to work for Ferrari on the Shell side. He was Colombian as me, and he had a lot of hours with Michael Schumacher. And he always told me that the thing that amazed him the most about Michael was his ability to switch from one thing to the other instantaneously and not let anything that happened in one thing affect what goes on next. Many of the drivers on the grid can have that ability, but the best athletes, the best minds also on the sport should have that, and I think Max can shift from sim racing and winning with Redline team and then come here and beat everybody else with the Red Bull racing team.
Hey, and he was inch perfect in that race, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Lando hunting him down at no point. He ran wide 3 times, but I think he was doing it when he needed to get the gap to keep him out of his DRS. So perfect performance from Max. Look, what about Checo Perez? You touched on him earlier. his worst quali of the season, back in 8th place. Then, of course, he finishes the race in 8th. Momentum. We've seen him lose momentum in the past. Do you think he's worried about the loss of momentum this weekend?
Yeah, I guess to some extent he is. You don't want him to get in this kind of downward spiral that he has been going through last year when things started to go wrong. Monaco is like a very isolated race, I would say, from the rest of the calendar in terms of what it requires, but it's usually a track where he performs very well,
Let's not think about last year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very true. But I think he can have the ability to rebound. Let's see how the Red Bull performs there. But it's a tricky time for Checo because he hasn't confirmed his contract for next year with Red Bull. Things haven't settled yet in the driver market, and you don't want to be doing the wrong thing at the wrong time, So yeah, he needs to get back to his previous consistent self, which he showed that he could keep a string of good races going. Suddenly this weekend, when the car was not there, he wasn't either, to some extent. So yeah, if Red Bull finds the performance again, that'll help him as well. But if Red Bull is fighting with McLaren and Ferrari so close, then it might be also very tricky for Checo to feel more comfortable and deliver as he did before.
Let's move on to McLaren now. I was having a conversation earlier with Tom Stallard, who is the race engineer for Oscar Piastri. He's a McLaren stalwart. He's been there for many years. He said that this weekend was the first time since 2012 that he didn't wish he had someone else's car in this pit lane because he thought he had the fastest one. The first time since 2012 that he felt like that. So McLaren are quick. Will Joseph, funnily enough, Lando Norris's race engineer, told us on F1 Nation last week that he thought the upgrades they'd taken to Miami would suit the car and the track better here in Imola, and that has proven to be the case. What do you think this tells us about the upcoming races?
I mean, as I was saying before, I guess this is more, I wouldn't look at it exactly as putting it more in a technical context, but more in the, let's say, organizational context of what McLaren is going through right now in terms of putting all the pieces together and being able to, build on while other teams are, struggling with correlation like Mercedes or making changes on their technical departments. McLaren is settled, it's settled. It was a surprise maybe for some of us to see David Sanchez suddenly not even take his role at McLaren. He's now elsewhere at Alpine, but the structure that they have, what they're showing is it's proving it's working. As I say, there may be some races where maybe Ferrari jumps ahead. I was very curious about what Charles Leclerc had to say about why he felt they didn't deliver as they expected, because there was a lot of expectation about these upgrades, and they were saying it's going to be 0.3 of a second. Well, not them, but the media in Italy were very excited about this when they came up in Fiorano. But he says that he's somewhat puzzled by how they lose on the first sectors of qualifying laps, and he thought that previously it was more related to tire performance, but now he's saying that some teams like Red Bull are doing something different with the way they use the energy on the engine for the start of the lap, and he believes that they are not doing that right, and that is compromising them, and that may have caused them a better position for the start.
But at least he's drawn that conclusion, so that is now an avenue that they can explore at Ferrari, isn't it? Yeah. But before we come on to Ferrari in more detail, I did want to touch on Oscar Piastri. Because all the talk has been Lando Norris, quite rightly, wins the race in Miami. Again, really impressive here. But so is Oscar Piastri. He was, I felt, really strong in Miami until, he had the contact. But then this weekend, let's not forget, he was faster than Lando in qualifying, and he made an amazing start in this Grand Prix. And I think had he been starting P2, there's every chance that he might have beaten Max Verstappen into turn 2 on the opening lap and won this Grand Prix. So Piastri is flying. How do you feel that they work as a double act, Oscar and Lando? Do you think it's exactly as Andrea Stella and Zach Brown would want it?
The fact that Oscar is so quick and pushes Lando as well is just what the team needs. I think Oscar for sure will need to learn more because it's only his second season in Formula One. It was the first time he was racing in Formula One here at Imola this weekend. Let's not forget, he had a test, yes, but all those things, every lap counts, and he's still very young. So I think for now it's what they need. I think on Sundays you see Lando makes his experience translate the potential of the car into the results. Oscar will, I guess, sooner than later do the same. It's been 2 races where he's had the track position to Lando, but somewhat, things end up in a different way, and Lando is the one getting the results. Like, in Miami, like you were saying, and here because of the penalty, because otherwise it would have been a different race. So I guess his time will come, but I suspect it's going to be very soon.
I feel that something has changed in Oscar in these last 2 races. I don't know whether it's a fire in his belly or whether it's these upgrades. Remember, he had half of the upgrades in Miami, but the way he's driving it, even his demeanour out of the car, I feel there's a confidence about him now that I didn't feel we had at the start of the season. So it will be fascinating to see how he develops. I don't think he can hide behind it's only my second season that much longer. He's actually had quite a lot of mileage, and I believe in him wholeheartedly. And think back to when Lewis Hamilton came into Formula One in 2007, opening 9 races on the podium. So I think if you're good enough, you're good enough immediately. And actually, we're sat on the Mercedes balcony here at Imola, and we'll come on to Kimi Antonelli in a minute. But I think the expectation is that wherever he ends up next year in Formula One, and I think it will be Formula One, he is going to be expected to perform from the first race. And I think Oscar is absolutely capable of that now. So, as I say, it's these last 2 races. There's a confidence about him, and he loves these upgrades. So, and I think with the steadying hand of Andrea Stella as well, I cannot praise that team principal at McLaren highly enough. I think he is exactly what a young driver needs to get the best out of him. He's an engineer, he's a people person. So I'm expecting great things. McLaren are on the move. What are they now? They're just 58 points behind Ferrari in the Constructors Championship. They're currently 3rd, but I think by the end of this season, they've definitely got their eyes on 2nd place. Now, with me, Italian journalist Andrea Cremonesi. On to Ferrari. Charles Leclerc, the first Ferrari driver to finish on the podium here at Imola since Michael Schumacher back in 2006. You and I can remember that, can't we? We've been around that long. But the podium was very special, wasn't it? And the Tifosi coming down, and Charles, to go back almost, I don't know whether it's a coincidence, but it's these last 2 races where I feel Charles has opened up a bit of a gap to his teammate at Ferrari, Carlos Sainz. He's got confidence with this car. Andrea, that podium, all the Tifosi below him, quite emotional, I guess, for Italians to see that.
It was really, really emotional. You see, all the people that are singing the national anthem under the podium, because they couldn't, of course, heard properly their own. It's something unusual, I suppose, around the world, no? And it's a sign of this passion. My president, the president of the Italian Federation, said that this is like a fight more than a passion for Ferrari. And this is something that we are very proud about it.
Now, what about the upgrades that Ferrari were bringing here this weekend? There was so much expectation. A little bit of disappointment?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, for sure, I just talked to them and they said to me it's the qualifying maybe was the key point of the weekend. If we were able to start a little bit front of in first row, for example, it could be different at the end of this Grand Prix. But at the end, I think that it's a close fight between three teams, and it's what Formula One needs at this moment.
It's incredibly close, isn't it? Those top three in the qualifying yesterday, just one tenth of a second apart.
Yeah, exactly. And the Grand Prix was, I think, the result was still a question mark until the last lap. Is one of the, I think, the slowest gap between Verstappen and some of his opponents on this championship.
Charles Leclerc was working with a new race engineer this weekend, Brian Bocci. His performance engineer was new as well, I think. Given all that, and the fact that they had the upgrade package on the car, actually, did he do a really brilliant job this weekend?
Yeah, I liked his way of speaking to Charles on the radio. Like he was saying, "Oh, you're the fastest driver on the track." He wasn't exactly, but he wanted to give him a push mentally because he knew that he was pushing to try to get Lando. So that is, these days, driver engineers are much more than just engineers. They have a very big role and very big responsibility on their shoulders, and a lot of what they say can make a driver switch their mind from one way to another. And he has been working with Charles before, so he knows what he needs to be able to deliver his best every weekend. And it's change. It's like a new start in some way for Charles right now, and hopefully he can start building. But I guess they did very well it was making your debut as a race engineer for Charles Leclerc at Imola in Italy with the upgrades, with all the expectation. A podium is not that bad, I guess.
Charles is walking past us right now. He's speaking to the videographer at Ferrari. Leo, the puppy, I think it's a Dachshund, isn't it? I think the puppy is on a lead, walking down the paddock with Charles. There we are. Of course, his home race in Monaco next weekend. He hasn't had much luck in Monaco, Charles Leclerc, has he? I feel his time is going to come. Maybe next weekend?
Hopefully it does, but yeah, it's been so much bad luck. Even when he did the historic Grand Prix with the Ferrari of Niki Lauda, and he crashed. Because through no fault of his own, because of a brake problem with the car. But yeah, at some point it's going to work out, because he has shown every time that he's really very, very quick at Monaco, and he just have to make that pole position count when it matters. It's been the strategy one time, then problem with the car the other. At some point it's going to come.
Let's bring this on now to Aston Martin and Mercedes, okay? Diego, you touched on that 2005-2006 battle, Alonso and Schumacher, yet that seemed a long way away from the Fernando Alonso that we saw this weekend. I felt like he never got going after that FP3 crash, and then of course when you're starting at the back, it's very difficult to overtake here.
Yeah, he was quite frustrated. On the TV pen on Saturday, he was just willing for the weekend to end and go home, because he knew there was nothing in the race for him to get or to learn. They tried with two different configurations on the car, just like the experiment that they did at the end of last year when the upgrades were not working. So hopefully that gives them some information to start getting some performance, which it seems that they were not able to get this weekend. Now, Lance got into the points, but yeah, it was not a weekend where Aston was at least keeping up with what they had shown before. They used to have a quick car in qualifying at the beginning of the year. Now they don't, but the pace is not either in the race. So there's going to be some head scratching. Last year when we got to Monaco, we were excited to see what Fernando could do. A little less so this year, I guess.
The battle with Mercedes, Diego, they're 35 points behind. Given everything we've seen in this first quarter of the season, do you think Mercedes are going to start to stretch their legs now ahead of Aston Martin?
Well, if you look at the maths, V-Carb is closer to Aston than what Aston is to Mercedes. So, yeah, you wouldn't like to see that for Aston Martin. Unfortunately, that's something that's carrying on from last year to some extent. When we saw the car being quick in qualifying at the beginning of this year, we got some optimism that they could carry on, and that the problems of the upgrades bringing and not delivering was solved, but this weekend, I guess, to some extent, is a little worrying for them that things are not working out. From the team, what I heard on Sunday morning is like this is just a step in the process to getting to where they believe they can get, but I don't think they have hit the ground running with as probably they expected with these new parts. And I don't know, sometimes Alonso says more with his demeanor than what he says with his words, although he's quite powerful with his words many times as well. But you could feel that he was frustrated from the very beginning of this weekend.
And Mercedes, on the other hand, had the second half of the upgrade package that they took to Miami. There was another step on the floor here, and both drivers were quite positive about the performance.
Well, to be honest, the gap between the winner and Lewis is quite huge. So I hope that they can improve a little bit more the car, because they, at the moment, they are really behind of another Mercedes team, no, supplied by Mercedes is like McLaren. No, it's during the race I was thinking about this, no, that it's supplier team is better than the official team. It's not happen quite often in this environment.
And I think there will be a slightly tetchy debrief as well. You know, George Russell being asked to pit. His teammate gets ahead of him. He didn't understand at the time. Okay, he went out and got fastest lap. I understand that. But there's such needle between teammates, isn't there?
Yeah, I asked him because I thought in the TV pin I thought he knew, but when he replied, I got the impression that he didn't exactly appreciate that call from the team, although he got the fastest lap as you said. But yeah, I mean, if there's a team that can move on from this and find the north that they haven't quite found at the beginning of the year, it should be Mercedes. But yeah, unfortunately, it's not happening yet, and they're losing ground. And it's more clear this time around that we are seeing, like Andrea was saying, three teams that are closer towards the front. Ferrari wasn't as close in terms of the qualifying performance this weekend, but in the race, when you see the times and how they performed, maybe if they find a little bit else additional in qualifying, there could be a closer fight with these top three teams up there, and if they're able to keep up with development of Red Bull.
Now let's talk about the second Italian team, VCARB. Yuki Tsunoda on fire. He finishes in the points again this weekend. I caught up with Team Principal Laurent Mekies a moment ago. Laurent, Yuki Tsunoda is driving out of his skin at the moment. You must be thrilled.
You know, he's doing an amazing job. You know, it's one thing to be comfortable with the car. It's another thing. He has done such a big step. Compared to last year, he's fast, he's consistent, he's getting faster every race weekend. You have weekends where he doesn't do one thing wrong from the first lap of FP1 to the last lap of the race, and you know, even more special when things don't go well. Like, you know, today we've lost 2 positions at the race start. You know, it could have gone difficult. It put us on the back foot. He stayed very, very focused. He didn't do one single mistake, and so, you know, he's driving amazingly well. Who knows, maybe there is more steps to come, you know. So at the moment it starts to be a very, very serious level we are talking about.
You'd never worked with Yuki before, of course. You came to VCARB from Ferrari. Has he exceeded your expectations?
I think he has exceeded everyone's expectations. So yes, for sure he did. The way he has been developing already through the seasons and compared to last year is amazing. I think he has surprised the whole paddock again. And you know, we should not put a limit to it. He's continuing to learn. He's continuing to develop. Maybe we think there will be more to come from him.
And what about your race car? It's getting better and better. Where do you see the battle going forward? I mean, what are you, 24 points behind Aston Martin? Are you looking forward, or are you looking back, just making sure you stay ahead of Haas? Is that the battle?
Well, at first, the first battle is a battle for P6. And you know, P6 for this year is already well ahead of our initial target, you know. So it's not at all granted that we can defend P6 to the end of the year. Haas is strong, Alpine is making progress. They will be stronger. Williams will come. You have seen they have declared they are overweight right now. If they sort that out, they will be a very, very serious guys to beat. And the same is for Sauber. So at first, the first priority is that fight for the P6. It's great to be already on the year one of the project in that fight, but nobody is taking it for granted. It's going to be without breathing until the last race. Yes, the last two events, surprisingly, Aston Martin was closer, or we were closer to Aston Martin. They are a very big company. I'm sure they will sort out their updates. But yes, it was good to fight for a bit more these last two events.
Very well done. Thank you. See you in Monaco next weekend. Thanks, Laurent. Andrea, what do you make of the 2024 spec Yuki Tsunoda?
He's doing a very good job, no? It's a big benchmark in his team, because you see, with an experienced driver like Daniel Ricciardo, in the past he was De Vrij, and then Lawson, two young guys at the end, two rookies, and now it's a season where he is this guy that he was able to win some Grand Prix. And he has, he drove quite easily without any pressure. He's doing his job very well.
And the performance of that car, it's just getting better and better. And I think had he not lost those two positions at the start, interestingly, Daniel Ricciardo lost a couple of places as well at the start. So maybe there's something they need to look at there ahead of Monaco next weekend. But do you think they've got the pace, well, to stay ahead of Haas? But where do you see that V-Carb Aston Martin battle?
Yeah, I mean, Aston Martin has Alonso, and it's a very good weapon to have. But
V-Carb has Yuki Tsunoda.
Yeah, it's going to take some time, I think, still for them to be able to make that step to be able to consistently battle with them. But it may well be the case, I remember at this stage of the season last year, around Barcelona, let's say, is when you started to see that the Aston Martin was kind of, falling down to pieces. It wasn't as quick as the team expected, and hopefully they learn out of these next few races enough to be able to make all those consistent upgrades that they have brought, because they've brought a lot more things to the car than at this time last year, but it doesn't seem to be enough for them to stay where they think they need to stay in terms of relative performance. So yeah, I think it's still some V-Carb still needs a little bit more, I guess, but Yuki is doing such a great job at many stages this week, and he was surprising us, putting the car up in the top 5, top 3, and he's finally, I think, getting his mindset in the right place. Although the thing is, what about his future? I mean, where is he going? There doesn't seem to be a better place for him right now than just staying there, because I think there must be some frustration that he's not even mentioned as a possible Red Bull driver for the future.
Is that the case? Because interestingly, this weekend, I've heard Yuki's name associated with a couple of teams.
Oh yeah, but not Red Bull teams.
But not Red Bull. I mean, for example, if Carlos Sainz doesn't end up going to Audi Sauber, I've actually heard Yuki's name being associated with that second drive alongside Nico Hülkenberg. Let's talk about the driver market, because it kind of went up a notch this weekend, didn't it? Okay, Alex Albon announced on the eve of this race that he's staying at Williams on a long-term contract, but I see Carlos Sainz as the key to what happens next. I've been told that we're going to hear in the next 2 weeks. I don't know whether that'll happen. It seems to me the deadline keeps moving, but if that is the case and we hear from Carlos maybe before the Canadian Grand Prix, then everything else will fall into place. But let's start with him. Where do we feel he's going to end up, Carlos Sainz? Andrea?
To be honest, on the paper he has 3 different options, no? One is Mercedes, one is Audi, one is Red Bull. I think that at the end it will be Audi. If I have to put money on it, it will be see him next year in Audi. Because Mercedes is working like a hell to have a Max Verstappen, I suppose, in 2 years.
And if they don't have Max, they've got Kimi Antonelli in the wings.
Of course, that's what as an Italian federation we hope. We hope until the end, maybe this season from Monza, but it's just, of course, what people in Italy would like to see, an Italian driver in Formula One. And so it's difficult for him, because you can maybe come here for 1 year, but then...
Come here as in Mercedes?
In Mercedes, I mean, yes. And Red Bull, I don't know how is the plan exactly out there, because they have of course, is another team that has a situation with a lot of question marks about his own future, about the management of the team too. So at this moment, I don't think that they are even ready to decide the driver lineup of next year. I think that the best thing for him is to be patient, to wait a little bit more.
Didn't he tell you in the press conference that we wouldn't hear for a while? Yeah, the other day.
he did say that, but you say one thing to the media, don't you? And you're probably doing the opposite a lot of the time. That's how it works in this paddock. But where do you think is the best fit for Carlos Sainz?
It depends, because the best fit in the short term will not necessarily be the best fit for him in the long term. I mean, I would like him to build this Audi team into his team for the future. But by the time that happens and Audi is able to contest for victories, we might be speaking about a few years. And he is in the best moment of his career. So why go to a team where he will not be able to keep building on this reputation and what he has been getting with Ferrari for the past few years?
It'll be extremely different if he goes there, in that he's going from a Ferrari to Sauber, who are currently last in the Constructors Championship. To bounce from Ferrari, where he's won a Grand Prix and he's going to fight for victories again this season, I'm sure, to then going to a back of the grid team, that's extreme. And I don't know how that affects a driver, but it'll be tough, won't it?
Yeah, because as Andrea was saying, with Antonelli, we don't know yet what's going to happen. This weekend we had another chance to see Antonelli race. From my point of view, I didn't see anything spectacular, May take a few races still to see that, but Mercedes has tested him in a Formula One car, and that's where he needs to be quick. If he has the super license point and he's delivering in the Formula One car, that's what will matter, and that's what probably Mercedes and Williams are finding out with these 2 tests that he has had so far. So yeah, following on with what Andrea was saying, if there's a chance for Carlos to be in a top team for 1 year, you don't know what can happen, so why not take it? It's his moment to continue building. You can build for the future later, or arrive there with a team a little bit more built up, I guess.
So your advice to Carlos Sainz is to take the 1 year deal from Mercedes or the 1 year deal from Red Bull?
If that's on the table, yeah, of course, I'll take it, yeah.
Okay. Now, what about Kimi Antonelli? As you say, he's done a couple of tests for Mercedes. James Allison said in the press conference on Friday that he's spoken to the engineers that ran him in those tests, and they say it looks like he's been in a Formula One car for ages. So I think he's hit the ground running. The team will also tell you that he's not yet as quick as the regular race drivers in it, but it's early days. He's 17 and he's only driven a Formula One car twice. If you were managing Kimi Antonelli and the opportunity came up to put him in the Mercedes, would you do that, or would you do what McLaren did with Lewis Hamilton and give him a second season? In Lewis's case, it was a second season in Formula 3. What would you do with Kimi Antonelli next year?
If I were his manager, I would try to put him in a team without any pressure. Mercedes is, I think, it could be a difficult challenge for a rookie. You see, after what they won in the last years, and now they have the pressure to come back as soon as possible in this. So you don't have too much room to make mistakes and so on. But if the only chance on the table, of course I will keep it. I try to take the risk.
So you would go Formula One. Go Formula One racing if the opportunity presents itself. Don't do another year in F2.
Yeah, that's for
Same,
sure.
same from you?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if he has the super license points, make the jump. Yeah.
He'll be 18.
But it's very different to do it with Williams than doing it with Mercedes.
Yeah.
Yeah. If he was with Williams, it would be, I think, a no-brainer for him.
Guys, it's been absolutely brilliant to have you both on the show. Now, we always end it with our driver of the day. Lando Norris got the vote on the telly. What do you think? Diego, your driver of the day here in Imola.
I think Lando is quite popular and he did make the race exciting. That's good for the spectacle, for the viewers. But my vote would be for Max. I think this weekend Red Bull didn't have the fastest car. He scored pole position and he won the race.
As the same of Diego, I had the same idea. I mean, it was at beginning of the weekend. It seems that was not possible for him to achieve the pole position until the qualifying. He made a perfect job on Saturday, and he built his victory on Saturday too. So it's fantastic. Of course, Lando did a fantastic race too because he keep the results open until the last lap. So it's difficult, but Max with this car today, he made for me the best job of all these 20 drivers.
Okay, it's the Grand Slam because I agree with both of you. I think Max Verstappen, I think he's underappreciated. The job he's doing, and I think it was proven to us this weekend how integral he is. You know, if Max hadn't been there, and our only judge on the Red Bull performance this weekend was Checo, there you go. You know, Max made a huge difference. And when it comes to Lando, I thought he did a brilliant job in the race, but he was out-qualified by his teammate, admittedly by half a tenth or something tiny, but that was a fact. He was out-qualified by Oscar, and I think a mention in dispatches for Oscar Piastri as well. I think he's been really strong this weekend. That really good start he made, it could have been so different for him had he not had that 3-place penalty, which was not his fault at all. He was not told by the team that Kevin Magnussen was coming in Q1. So, you know, and it is curved, that run down to the first chicane at Tamburello. So he didn't know he was there. It wasn't his fault, but he still got that 3-place grid penalty from which he wasn't able to recover. So the top 10 looked like this. Max Verstappen took his third win at Imola, coming home just 0.7 of a second ahead of Lando Norris in second. And Charles Leclerc rounded out the podium for Ferrari on home turf. Then came the second McLaren of Piastri in fourth, with Sainz taking his third consecutive 5th place just behind. The two Mercedes of Hamilton and Russell were 6th and 7th, with Perez 8th, Stroll 9th and Tsunoda 10th. In the Drivers' Championship, Verstappen leads the way on 161 points, 48 ahead of new second-place man Charles Leclerc. Perez is third, just 6 points ahead of the rapidly progressing Norris. Sainz is 5th and Piastri 6th, with the two Mercedes of Russell and Hamilton 7th and 8th. Alonso is 9th and Tsunoda is 10th. In the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull have a commanding 56-point lead over Ferrari in second, with McLaren a further 58 points back in third. Mercedes are a lonely fourth, with Aston Martin 5th and VCarb 6th. Haas remains 7th on 7 points, with Alpine 8th on just the 1 point. Williams and Sauber have yet to score. Do you think that a lot of people turned up this weekend because of the Senna celebrations? Of course, we saw Sebastian Vettel driving Senna's 1993 McLaren. Vettel actually very emotional when he got out of his car. His father, Norbert, was crying as well. I mean, do you think some people have come because of the anniversary?
I would think so. I mean, I saw a lot of hats, T-shirts, you know, people in the stands with Senna themed things, and young people, you know, people who didn't see Ayrton race and probably saw his documentary and have heard about him. But yeah, I think that brought some attention, and there was a lot of Senna things about this weekend. He was somehow present for the whole weekend. I felt it was very strong, his presence. Even before coming here, I had a lot of anticipation about coming here because I couldn't come last year, and I never been to the statue at Tamburello, and I usually do a walk of the track for Fox Sports on Thursday, and you feel as soon as you come in, you feel the weight of that story, because it's a very powerful story, what happened 30 years ago, and I'm sure some people were somewhat connected to it and came just to feel. I have some friends from Colombia who came in, and they were speaking about that as well. So yeah, I think that has brought attention.
It seems that a little part of Brazil was here during this weekend, and not only the weekend, because you have to remember that all the celebrations start even before then the 1st of May. There were a lot of events on the downtown here in Imola, and there were the relatives of him here too. There was a launch of the motor bicycle. There was a lot of demonstration. It's quite amazing to see young people that didn't know him. So it's in Italian we said intramontabile. There is no sunset on this guy.
I always feel his presence when we come here, and I ran the track the other night. I did stop at Tamburello, and the number of banners and flags was way more. I know it's the anniversary, but it was actually quite emotional just stopping there. And I guess quite poignant that I saw Gerhard Berger earlier in the week as well, and he was talking about it, and just thought, I don't know, all the emotions come together, and then when you saw Seb also pushing quite hard in that McLaren for a couple of laps as well. He can't help himself. He did the same, funnily enough, when he was driving the other car that he owns, Nigel Mansell's FW14B at Silverstone last year. He just gets in these things and can't resist it, can he? But anyway, it's been a wonderful celebration of all things Senna, and very well done to Imola for laying everything on.
And Roland Ratzenberger, which Sebastian was very keen to get the flag out, the Austrian flag, just like Senna wanted to do if he had finished that race 30 years ago.
Very good point. Well made. Thank you, Diego. I just wanted your podium predictions for Monaco now. Let me kick things off. Obviously, it was a stunning weekend there last year. A huge battle between Fernando Alonso and Max Verstappen for pole position. I think Max goes there with so much confidence, and I also point to turns 14, 15. This is something that Lando mentioned after the race today. Those are the slowest two corners here at Imola, and he said, actually, those were my worst corners around the lap here. Now, I know this is a high-speed track, therefore you're not setting the car up to perform necessarily through those two corners, but it's a tiny indication that maybe the low-speed performance of the McLaren might not be as strong next weekend. So I'm not sure he's going to be on the podium. So I'm going to go for a Max Verstappen win, and then I think it's going to be two Ferraris behind, with Charles Leclerc second and Carlos Sainz third. Andrea, let's throw it to you now. Predictions for Monaco?
I mean, it's a realistic podium, what you just tell. It's possible that the two Ferraris will be on the podium. Max, I think that he keep the momentum coming from this not easy weekend, a tricky weekend for him. And Monaco is still Monaco, with a lot of question mark about what can happen during the qualifying. Just a little mistake and you can ruin your weekend. Of course, it should be nice, I think, also for Formula 1 to see that Charles Leclerc can win in his home Grand Prix, so cancel all the bad luck that he had in his own country, small country, but important country for Formula 1.
It would be mega if Charles were to win. Exactly. I feel bad now that I said that Max was going to win. What about you, Diego?
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned before, we're seeing a shift in momentum at Ferrari with Charles and Carlos. Carlos has always been very good at Monaco. but so has Charles. Probably Carlos has been able to translate that in more results than Charles. But this turn 14-15 is like the chicane in Barcelona before, when we went to Barcelona,
yes.
Sector 3. Who's quick at Sector 3? Then that's going to be Monaco podium. But many times I found myself saying, well, it wasn't the case. so I'd go with Charles finally getting his victory at home. I think that would be good for the championship too. He's now second in the championship. Maybe Max beating Max for the victory, and third, that's a difficult one. I'll put Checo back on the podium. Hopefully he gets his season back on after this difficult weekend here.
Well, guys, thank you very much for joining us on the show. It's been great to chat. Couple of notices before I go. This week's guest on F1 Beyond the Grid is Carl Wendlinger, who reflects on his career-defining crash at Monaco 30 years ago. And race-winning strategists Ruth Buscombe and Bernie Collins are on the F1 Explains podcast this week, answering your F1 questions. We'll, of course, be back next Monday from the Monte Carlo paddock with our review of the Monaco Grand Prix. Thanks very much for listening. F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios.